All right, it looks like it's a few minutes past the hour. I think we can get started. Welcome to CDM for July 2020. Today we're going to talk about a few topics in Crimson. So Sam, do you want to take it away?
Yep, I thought I'd give a brief overview of what's happened in C-Store over the last month or two, and then talk about some upcoming stuff. Keith is here. Okay. So for C-Store, at least, we have the first couple of rounds of pull requests in, adding basic low-level infrastructure for an interface for DNS devices, abstracting away the sort of sequential writing process, as well as a transaction structure for writing out blocks and serializing deltas to blocks that have already been written, as well as a B-tree implementation mapping logical addresses to statistical addresses. For more information on that, you can look at the cstore.rst document, or let me find the Google Doc. Although the cstore.rst, we're trying to keep up to date as the authoritative one, as it is actually in the repo. Yeah, here we go. One sec. Right. So the other major leg of work that's going on is getting recovery and backfill up to a place where they can support toothology testing up to a basic level of killing OSCs and bringing them back with a consistent workload. And most of the basic infrastructure is in place, and we're just waiting on, I think, 2 more PRs for basic support to be complete for replicated pools. And the other major task is getting Crimson OSD integrated into toothology. Kivu, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Nope.
Oh, and for C-Store, we're all in parallel. There's also work going on to implement the ONO tree, which is different, as well as a more basic B-tree mapping extent offsets within each object to L-adders. I'm not sure what we want to go into. I could go into some more detail about the C-Store layout, but I think the document actually does a better job of that.
Oh, by the way, we are still also working on the scrubbing by extracting the scrubbing.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Structure out of the classical OSD, and the next step is porting to Crimson.
It's worth going into a little bit more detail about C-Store in terms of which pieces are left and kind of what are the limitations of the current prototype.
So the current prototype isn't complete yet. Can't actually do I/O. So at a high level, from a conventional file system point of view, I guess we have something like a block writeout and a manager for abstracting block I/O. We have an LBI indirection layer. We're lacking garbage collection, and we're lacking dirty node writeout. And right now I'm working on some cache niceties that will enforce pinning of B-tree node dependencies as a prerequisite for doing dirty node writeout. Above that, those layers comprise the transactional layer within C-Store. Above that, there are still pieces that are in progress to map the actual object store abstractions onto that lower level block abstraction, namely the O-node B-tree, which is pretty complicated. The goal is to avoid as much as possible duplicating the very long string prefixes that are common between consecutive O-nodes, or H objects rather, within the O-node tree, and the somewhat simpler work on the extent tree. Does that make sense? I can go into more detail, I suppose, but I mean, I can go into more detail, but at that point, it's just a design overview of CStore.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good level of detail there. So at this point, do we have like any lower level tests that we can run with the existing components of CStore, or are we kind of waiting for them to be more complete
There are
to
unit
run the
tests.
store tests?
There are unit tests, but before you can actually run real I/O tests, there needs to be enough functionality in place that it can reuse space. And those are the two things I'm trying to get done next, namely writing out dirty blocks and garbage collecting and reusing segments. So right now, all of the unit tests just write sequentially to the available space, and they simply terminate before they run out. But if you tried to run any kind of real workload, you'd quickly run out of memory, as well as space. Also, the object store implementation components aren't complete yet. Because we don't have anything like RocksDB, there are no freebies for doing the O-node to extent mapping. That all has to be implemented by hand.
Oh, Sam, do we want to cover the part of alienized BlueStore?
Oh, that's true. Functionality implementing BlueStore within Crimson using an external thread pool and a message passing subsystem has been merged and is usable. Benchmarking is possible on that system with Crimson, and that's the subsystem, or that's the configuration we're planning on using for initial topology testing.
We can perhaps do that even without our recovery and scrub functionality merged, right? We can just run some basic workloads after setting up a Crimson OSD.
Well, that's certainly valuable, but my goal is to make recovery and backfill work, because at that point we have a real OSD. It's
Sure.
sort of, in other words, the thing that's really hard to do unit testing of is arbitrary killing of OSDs, and you can't do that without recovery and backfill. And also, you can't test recovery and backfill without mythology. So those two things together comprise what I see as the minimum viable prototype. In my opinion, because at that point you have a storage system, right? You can store, retrieve, and recover from failures. You may not be able to do it quickly, but at least it works.
Yep, makes sense.
And once we get over the initial activation energy of literally there exists one topology test, every PR after that has actual confidence. We're able to test things. It's a huge productivity booster. Not that I'm opposed to creating other topology tests first. That's just the one I see as the biggest single milestone within testing.
Yeah, I agree.
Right now, if you want to actually test any of the stuff, you need to start up your own vStart cluster. It's way too much to ask of a new developer.
So what is the status of topology integration so far?
Or I can.
Kivu, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I can talk about this. About two months ago, we decided to start with Ceph ADM based test, because we foresee that it's a future to deploy a Ceph cluster using Ceph ADM and to deploy Ceph OSD and other daemons in a container. So we started to, but we have been packaging Crimson OSD for a long time, but haven't packaged it in a Docker image. So in 2 weeks ago, we managed to build the Docker container image with a Crimson OSD in it. But it turned out that it's because currently crimsOSD and CephOSD have a different execute name in when we build it apparently to differentiate crimsOSD from classic OSD. But when it comes to start to the tooling, to the testing, we always need to reference the executable by its name. And when it comes to the systemd service units, we also reference the executable by its name. So we decided to rename the crimsOSD to CephOSD when packaging it and using to try to leverage the existing tooling and scripts, whatever exists. So currently we are using, but to enable crimsOSD with Ceph ADM, we need to teach Ceph ADM to perform a tag with the crimson encoded in the tag. We haven't done this, but since we have renamed crimsOSD to CephOSD when packaging it, we can reuse the existing tasks for installing crimsOSD. For installing the classic OSD to do the job, because Ceph Suite allows us to pass the flavor. By the way, we use the flavor machinery to build crimsOSD and to build classic OSD. So that allows us to run the test using the classical way. So currently, yesterday I was still testing the second approach, namely to deploy and the cluster using the old way. I will continue on today and then the next week. I think that's it.
So besides getting the container image prepared, you see any other kind of roadblocks or changes needed to start running a basic topology test?
There are two issues in this question. One is because currently Ceph ADM pulls the images from the registry by the hash, which is the missing information is for example, the flavor. We miss the flavor in the.
That would be. Why not add that to the topology configuration?
Yes, we need to pass that in the configuration of a YAML file, for example. But we need to update the Ceph ADM to do it. To push, for example, the first thing is to update the Ceph-container script to push the image with the right tag. And then on the other side, we need to teach Ceph ADM to pull the image with the right name. So that's something we are missing at this moment. That's why I was trying to use the first way, the classical way, by installing the packages.
Does classic OSD topology currently use Ceph ADM?
We have two places using Ceph ADM. One is apparently the Ceph ADM test suite. Another is the suite, the radio suite, which tests the old clients, where we install the old client using the on CentOS 7, for example, and deploy
so does the Ceph ADM installer actually support all of the things needed to run the thrashers?
I think so. Thrasher actually drives the daemons using a actual class, something like a daemon.
Yeah, I know. But if actually implemented, does it all work?
Yes.
Because it sounds to me like none of the existing tests use it.
No. In theory, it should work.
That seems bad. That seems risky.
It's in progress. So Yuri's been working on this now, and it's working with the upgrade suites now for Octopus to master,
Okay.
and we're converting the
Okay.
beta suite slowly.
Okay. If that's where we're going, then I guess that's what we should do. I just
I
don't necessarily want to block on it.
agree.
Even the thrash old clients does a bit of thrashing on its own. So there is coverage, but not as much as you would like at this moment. But I think, as Josh mentioned, Yuri's continuing to work on that.
As long as the base abstraction is implemented, then we could fix things as they come up. But I think my goal was to just port over tests as they become relevant. I'm kind of hoping we don't actually have to change them, though.
That's the idea. The idea Ceph ADM task is essentially a drop-in replacement for the Ceph task.
But we do
Right,
we
but
need
it's
to
not that
update
yet.
the
It's just
places
almost that,
where
or it's in
we do the
progress
remote
of
call.
becoming that. Yeah, but it's in progress of becoming that. It is not that yet.
Well, it is that today, modulo any bugs that we find in the process of adding more suites using it.
Okay, that seems fine then.
Yeah, we need to update the topology to pass the command into the container. But I think that in the short term, I think we should go with the classic way, namely to install and deploy the cluster using the install task and Ceph task instead of Ceph ADM.
I
Even
mean,
just
if that
for
can be done
debugging it.
easily, then yeah, I'm on board with that. I mean, testing time for recovery and backfill is the biggest risk for Pacific, I think. So the more that Ceph ADM is in the critical path, the more worried I am. But Josh, you figure that even Classic will be swapped over soon?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as big a deal as you're thinking it is. I think it's mostly already there, or the bugs are going to be around higher level services like RGW or SFFS
Okay.
integration.
I'm pasting the PR for adding the first thrashing test to topology down Crimson.
I did want to note for this one, I would really encourage you to add enough YAMLs so that exactly one test runs. Like we don't need two versions. We don't need both size 2 and size 3. We only need one thrasher. We only need one workload. Like I would really try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, I will cut down it a little bit so it's like a very basic one, so we can troubleshooting it whenever it come up and add more of them when it's stabilized.
I think small objects is the right one to grab. Except remove copy from. Yeah, I'll comment actually. I forgot. Snapshots probably don't work yet.
Yeah, we don't support the snaps, so we should, and we don't support copy from, and probably not set attribute and such. Probably just need to read and write. That would be probably that will suffice.
That will keep us busy for some time, I think.
Yeah.
By the way, one thing that's missing from the Ceph ADM task today is it doesn't scrub everything in the cluster at the end, which is good for Crimson right now since that's not implemented yet. But we'll probably want to add that later.
What's up?
The Ceph ADM task today isn't scrubbing the entire cluster at the end like the Ceph task does. So that's something we may want to add later.
Well, at the moment, scrub doesn't work, so it's okay for Crimson.
Exactly.
And we'll need ways to disable things like that, but that's easy to add as we port tests over. That kind of thing is straightforward.
Yep.
So are we reviewing this PR, or are we going to continue on with the CDM?
Oh, I mean, I think the PR looks fine. This looks
okay,
right.
Great.
I mean, my only comment was I think we should cut it down to exactly one test until that works super reliably.
Yes, I agree. We need to be positive at the first step.
Just because I'm pretty confident that any thrashing test is going to turn up a lot of bugs. We don't need two of them.
Yes, one bug at a time.
You mentioned you wanted to talk about M2M strategies?
Yes, I create a etherpad for it. Actually, we've been talking about it in like 4 months ago, in January this year.
We've made several consecutive decisions to kick the can down the road.
So I'm wondering if we want to nail down something in this CDM or not, because
in my mind, that's the conversation we have the day after we stop being able to find bugs in recovery or backfill with a simple thrashing test. Specifically because the bugs that will come up with M2M mapping implementations will be ordering bugs, and they're going to be insanely difficult to find without randomized testing.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with kicking the can down the road for another month.
Yes, we can kick the can down the road a little bit.
You can open up for questions about Crimson? Discussion points?
Are there any other pieces that you're worried about in terms of recovery and backfill?
I mean, the PRs I've reviewed look complete. I mean, they have all the pieces they need to have. So it's a matter of stabilizing them. So in other words, I think the biggest thing missing from recovery and backfill is a thrashing pathology test.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
I mean, there are lots of things that will need to be implemented eventually. Like we'll need erasure coding will require an entire additional pass over this stuff. Adding features like copy from will have snapshots will have knock-on effects. Although I think they actually, I believe we covered all of the relevant code. It just probably doesn't work. But I think the feature is actually there in a limited sort of form.
Yeah, all these renders the pathology-based test a blocker.
Do you guys think that we can still afford to run some standalone tests with the existing framework?
I'm sure you can. It's just that none of them do a good job of stressing the recovery or backfill code. Not even with classic OSD.
Right. I mean, just as a first step, better than nothing, right?
Not really. I don't see any
Right.
reason why we can't get let me put it this way. I don't see any reason why we can't get pathology testing working.
No,
Like,
I'm
if
not,
we
I'm not
can't get
saying,
that
I'm not
working,
saying, no, I'm not saying we don't get pathology testing working. I'm just saying with the current state of the PRs, is it possible to run standalone tests or not?
which ones? I'm aware of a number of them that use specific internal calls in Classic to do things like black hole messages. That stuff doesn't exist in Crimson yet. Like, those are
Right. So,
really, really specific to the way Classic is implemented. There are tests
correct.
that just test external things, like testing that clients work or that APIs work, but that's not really what we're talking about here.
We do have some that take care of like stuff like recovery and like PG logs and stuff like that. So maybe those can be useful.
They have black hole mans generally wired in, and/or things that restrict the size of the PG log. I'm not sure if that stuff's implemented properly in Crimson.
Got it.
And and each of those is designed to turn up one bug, as I recall. The PG log ones in particular. So while we probably could get them to work, it's not as valuable as getting randomized testing.
Right, but then Teuthology tests are going to break that run the standalone under Teuthology.
And that's probably step 2. Like, once we do have randomized tests, we'll want to make sure Crimson has all of those workalikes so that those tests do work. It's just not,
Okay.
I just don't see it as being as important as getting the most basic thrashing tests working. In other words, we didn't discover those bugs by using standalone tests. We wrote them afterwards. They've been good for caching regressions, but they didn't generate the initial bug reports for the most part.
Speaking of failure injection, does the Crimson Messenger support that today?
Good question.
I think we do.
That's also a very helpful part of the thrashing suites in general.
Yeah, that's true. That'll be a thing to add.
I think the for failure injection strainer has been implemented in Messenger, Crimson Messenger already.
Cool.
It is exercised by its unit test.
Okay, great. Easy to make sure it's enabled in the new suite then.
Yep. I'll see if we can write it up with a configuration or not. By the way, I think the tautology-based test should be ready by the end of this week.
Excellent.
Just need to cut down the unnecessary sets and start with that simple one.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Very exciting. Are there any other kind of outstanding pieces around Crimson to discuss?
I think we've covered all the broad categories. Yep, I think that's it.
No, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any other topics want to bring up? All right. Well, that's it then. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next month.
I think see you later.
Thanks.